Hi, I'm Clésia Mendes, and welcome to the second season of Womanhood from the Inside Out. In this interview series, we'll be discovering and uncovering the nature of womanhood from the inside out. Why is it important? When does it show? How can we identify it? And what are the implications of womanhood from the inside out? And today's guest is my dear friend, Quinn Cashion. For more than 20 years, Quinn has been fascinated with beauty. She spent over a decade working in the beauty industry, which included teaching self-development programs for girls. And her work with girls inspired her to become a counselor and explore beauty from the inside out. After her second daughter was born, she created Girl Spirit, a service to assist moms in raising vibrant, insightful, brave, empowered girls or vibe girls to meet today's challenges as a woman with grace and confidence. Welcome, Quinn.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you here today. So, how did you first came across the inside out understanding of life?
Well, I think they found me. You know, my understanding of these beautiful principles is that they show up when the student's ready. And I was ready. Had just finished my counseling program, and I had learned about these different theories on how to help people. And nothing really resonated except for mind-body connection type theory. But a dear friend of mine introduced me to the principles. And I remember that first day going to her house for the conversation or the meeting she was gathering people for. And it made sense, but it didn't make sense. You know, I was still in my head about it. And then she'd given me George Pransky's book, The Relationship Handbook. And I was sitting on a deck at a cottage with a glass of red wine, reading this book, and I'm going, this is it. And it was one of those, this is it, but I'm not sure what that it is. But there was something that felt right. It's that deep knowing that tells you there's some shift that's going to happen. And at the time, my passion has always been working with girls, preteen and teenage girls. And it was like this was the missing piece in the programs that I was teaching. You know, because for so many years I was teaching beauty from the outside, you know, how to take care of their skin and how to walk properly and sit and how to put on a coat, because I was in the fashion world for a while. And but there was something missing. And for me, this was the missing piece, missing link, the missing beauty tip that needed to come into the programs. And what a difference it makes to talk to girls about their beauty from the inside out.
Hmm. And I love that. Mostly when you got in contact for the first time, I say, Clésia, I would like to speak about beauty from the inside out. It was like, wow, that never occurred to me. So, and mostly because you were connected to the fashion industry. So let me just take you back a little bit. So when you first you got in contact with your friend, or this understanding found you, as you said, and then your friend recommended George Pransky's book. Do you remember what was going on in your life and what sort of shifts happened almost straight away?
I started to see life differently, you know, and things started to make sense. So for an example, when my first daughter was born, I remember leaving the hospital, and it was like I was fascinated with the way the world looked. It looked different. And nothing changed. The trees were still the same. The roads were still the same. But there was a profound shift in me where the world looked different. And if that was giving birth, not only to my child, but to a new way of looking at the world. And I feel like the principles has made sense, has helped me understand that at a deeper level. I think it's been an ongoing journey for sure. You know, like everyone says, you never get to the end of the understanding of these principles. And that's the beauty of the gift of them, because it's always a surprise. You know, something new always pops up when you least expect it. So for me, it's an ongoing journey, and to stay present to that feeling, and stay present even when I'm in a crappy space, you know, because there's beauty even in that. And I did a program once where we were working with, getting ready to work with support groups for women that were dealing with eating disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And the facilitator started putting up pictures of different body shapes. And there was one of a woman that was very full figured. And it could take you back a little bit. But the more you looked at her, the more beautiful she became. Nothing changed in that picture but my eyes, you know, and so it started to change how we start to see people through our skin. You know, it's the beauty industry stays stuck on this outer level, and they haven't gone deeper yet. We haven't looked at beauty from inside and how that truly enhances any makeup regime you use, any clothing fashion statement you want to make. That inner beauty, if that's not taken care of first, you don't get to enhance it as much as you would have if you could see how beautiful you are on the inside.
Mm. I love that. And something that a phrase that occurred to me actually is that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. And one thing is to have what some people would call intellectual understanding of that phrase because it's beautiful. But it's a totally different situation when we actually realize it for ourselves. We insightfully see that as our perceptions change, we see the world differently. Is that what you're pointing at, or is something different?
No, that's exactly right. You know, you could be in the same situation and have new eyes for it, regardless of what's on the outside world. And sometimes it's hard. You know, I've had situations in my life recently. I'm a single mom, so there's been a lot of challenges that have come my way. And how do I see it differently? How do I stay grounded enough so that I don't get bothered by it? And there's this beautiful um, quote, and hopefully I don't mess it up. It says, "A woman full of joy never gets trapped by any troubles." So when our hearts are full of joy, troubles could come our way, but we don't get consumed by them. You know, it's kind of like the flowers. You know, they don't get consumed by the weeds. They continue to blossom and they continue to do their thing. You know, the weeds don't bother them. They know what they know what they're here to do, which is, I think, the gift of that inner understanding is that we start to see what we're here to do. We see our life mission that is doesn't get caught up in the external world. There's an alignment to mind, to the creative energy, the creative force that's out there that helps us design our lives in a way that brings beauty into the world.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. And all of a sudden, I became really curious. So, when you were in the fashion industry, you said that one of the things you did was to deliver personal development projects for young ladies. So, when you were doing those projects, what did you used to do? Can you give us a little bit of large swipes of on the curriculum, how you would start the conversations with them, what sort of insights they had, or if you could just give us some examples, please.
Oh, it was interesting. I mean, I started working with girls at a very young age. I was a baton twirler since I was 5 years old. So I was always doing things with girls, and I became a teacher in the school. And then at 16, I had my own baton school. and worked with girls that were younger than me and teaching them how to twirl. And so it was just seems like a natural evolution of who I was, or who I am, I should say. And I always was fascinated by beauty and that whole industry. So when I went to school for it up in Toronto, I one of the things I wanted to do as part of my schooling was to run a course at one of the rec centers that was in the community. And so I ran a 10-week program for girls, and I had quite a few. I had about 20 girls, and I just talked about skincare. You know, it's talking to girls about what interests them.
Mm.
But, you know, I remember George always saying, you got to start with where they're at. You know, and so for girls, that's where they're at. They're trying to figure out their image. They're trying to figure out who am I, and what's my statement in the world when it comes to beauty. You know, because there's so much coming at them, and you know that's one of the things we talked about in the world of eating disorders is media, and the impact media is having on our girls and even boys now because of the six packs that our younger boys are having now. And so there's a lot of pressure about what you're supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, if we took a step back and looked at media differently, that it's my thinking in that moment when I look at that cover of that magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel good about who I am and I'm fully in my well-being and my beauty, it doesn't bother me, you know. And I go, wow, that's a really beautiful picture. But if I'm not feeling that way and I'm starting to feel insecure, then I'm looking at a picture with a whole different set of eyes. And it can consume me and spiral me into I'm not good enough, I'm not beautiful enough. There was somebody in the industry that would start her programs when girls feel ugly, fat, and stupid. And I was like, whoa, how are we missing what's already inside these girls and pointing them there first before we start looking at media and looking at the beauty industry and the fashion industry? So the message is starting to change. I mean, they're starting to recognize girls who are too thin is not a healthy statement for the world of fashion. So the dialogue is starting, which is lovely to see. There's different sizes of girls now that are modeling, which is lovely because now girls can relate a little bit more that I could be full figured and I am gorgeous and just really embrace all of ourselves. And I just love that. So this particular program I started way back when I was in school, I did a fashion show because it was a fashion program I was in. So part of the celebration I wanted to have for the girls at the end of the program was a fashion show.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the girls in my class was a bit of a rebel. She lived on the edge a little bit. And the other girls had a problem with that. And I had put her in certain parts of the show because I like to put a show together that's very artistic and
Mm-hmm.
had some story theme through it. And so I gave her a bigger part in the show. And something happened just before the show started, like about an hour or 2 hours before the show. And she took off. It's like, oh no, you can't do that. So I ran after her, and I remember her sitting on the edge of this field. It was raining out. So all her makeup and her hair was getting wet. And, you know, she was really stuck in her thinking about what these other girls had said. And, you know, it was just about zeroing in on that beautiful spirit she has, that, you know, that just oozed of possibilities, of leadership, of, you know, it was just, this girl had something in her that I could see that she couldn't see and the other girls couldn't see. Anyways, I said something and something resonated with her and she came back. And I still remember, and this is many years ago, I still remember her standing on stage in the finale. You know, she was full of joy. So she went from not feeling this beauty inside of her to feeling the fullness of it in a short period of time. And I think if we can give that to our daughters, if we could give that to the girls that are in our lives, where they can really experience that for themselves, I think life would change. You know, we wouldn't be having this culture of rape because girls will stand up to it. You know, my daughters, I've got 2 daughters in high school, and, you know, they have great groups of friends and teenage boys who are academically doing very well. And yet when they come together, they think it's okay to talk about rape. And for my daughter, it's not okay. She's got this warrior woman inside of her who says, what are you guys doing? It's not okay to talk that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be young girls and women who are going to be teaching the young men that it's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be partners with us, the language has to change. And so when we come into our beauty, when we come into our wholeness, it ripples out, you know, it ripples out into the world in a lovely way.
Mm-hmm. I love that story. I got so touched while you were clearing your tears. I was
Yes,
clearing them,
right.
some over here as well. I was like, oh, mascara won't look good on video. And it was the truth of what you were saying. And something that occurred to me, I met for coffee with a friend of mine, was traveling the world 2 weeks ago. No, she was traveling the world for a while. I met her 2 weeks ago. And we got together before she takes off again. And we were talking about this wonderful relationship that she's got with her new partner. And she was telling me about a situation. And when she actually stood for herself and said, no, this doesn't work for me, he showed up differently. And she was taken away by his reaction. I said, I couldn't believe that, because I just came to realize, no, this doesn't work for me. And I stood my ground, but not in a, actually, the word that occurs to me, in an assertive way, is knowing really your value, where you stand at. It was like, no, this is draw the line. I love you, and this doesn't work for me. And
Mm.
because she draw the line and that certainty came across, then allowed the space for her partner to show up differently. And she couldn't believe, because he was being such a gentleman after that. And she was like, Clésia, what do you make of that? And I said, well, I don't know for a fact, because I don't know him personally. I'm just hearing secondhand you telling me the story. But it seems to me that when you choose to stand out for who you really are,
Mm.
creates the space for the other person to do the same.
Yeah. And we have such a hard time as women because we're caregivers, you know, we care and serve everybody else, and we become secondary. And that's been really interesting for me because of this journey I've been on the last little while, being a single mom. You know, after the divorce, one of my daughters wasn't well, and that was my number one priority, was her well-being, and doing everything I needed to do to support her in that journey. And I tell you, watching her find her voice at 15 years old was amazing to watch. And I thought, she's going to do well in life because she found her voice. And it's exactly that. So in my research that I've done on girls, they start to lose their self-esteem around puberty. So anyway, it could be anywhere from 10 to about 12, where it starts to dip, because relationships become more important to us than speaking up and saying, I'm here. and it's like, well, when do we get it back? When do we wake back up to it? And so I think our work is, and certainly feels like my work has been, making sure they never fall asleep to it.
That's so interesting. And about the subject of finding your own voice, actually, I was having a conversation with one of our guests, Jackie Ford, and we spoke about that, the subject of finding her voice. And she said, Clésia, what if it's not about finding your own voice? What if it's about more uncovering, rediscovering your own voice?
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. It's coming home to it.
Mm,
Because when we came into this world, that at 10 and 12, it's already there. But for some reason, and it seems to be a culture for women, that we stop living in it. And that's a good example of an outside in way of seeing womanhood,
yeah.
that, all these diets and all these things that are out there to make us better, when really we're already perfect, because perfection is wholeness, and we are already whole. So there's really nothing to do except take those beautiful paintbrushes and paint our world in a way that looks like our inner world does
Mm.
when we're home.
Now, one of the things when you sent me your bio, I've noticed that you've wrote a book. So would you like to tell us about your book?
Well, there's a lot happening right now around writing some books. My 17-year-old daughter and I are wanting to write something, because I started journaling with her way back when she was around 7 years old.
Mhm.
So we have a journal that's been going back and forth for years, and so we thought it would be a fun way to share our story with other mums and daughters, because there's so many struggles between the mother-daughter relationship for so many, and yet it's the most beautiful relationship to have. And but the one that's been written so far is a manual, which I've used for when I was hired for a contract to deal with eating disorders, because the whole field of eating disorders is really in intervention. There hasn't been a lot of work that was being done around prevention. And so when I came on board, we looked at well, for me, it was like, okay, I have these beautiful divine gifts of these three principles and an opportunity to share these with young people going into elementary schools. How can I write something? And it was so hard, because I have to put form to a formless idea, but I need to do that to be in a school. So I had a lot of thinking going on. But we put this 10-week program together. So it's 10 lessons
Mhm.
to go into schools. And it took a long time to write, because the language is so different when we talk from an inside out perspective. And
Mm.
what a gift it is to the school system to start seeing resilience that's already in the children that they're working with. Um, so that happened several years ago, and I was supposed to teach teachers, because we wanted to create sustainability in the school system. But I thought, well, I better start working with kids so that I can get a feel for what it's like to work this way with children. And I had never worked with boys before. So this was new for me as well. I just wanted to go and do girls. But when I went into classrooms, it was, a good half and half. And it was great. It was just so much fun. The kids just picked it up so easily. And um, one particular project I worked with, I was called in because a girl was suffering from an eating disorder in grade 5.
Mm.
And the whole classroom was really struggling. So in Canada, we have a lot of social emotional learning that takes place in the classroom. So the teacher, bless her heart, was doing her best to help them focus in the class, but they were just really struggling. And so I came in for 10 weeks. And by week 8, the class was calm. And it was so nice to see that they were starting to see what creates the lack of focus for themselves. And this particular girl was showing up every day on time. She was participating in class. Like, her whole demeanor changed. And they created a project based on these principles that they shared with the whole school. So it was just an amazing experience. So just that for me was seeing the possibilities in schools. And I just had a wonderful meeting yesterday with an educator that it's like, wow, we need this. Like, we really need to get this into our schools. So it's something that I could see is starting. It's like that tipping point. You know, we're starting to see worldwide that kids are getting touched by these principles, and there's so many wonderful people doing the work now that are reaching out to kids in all different shapes. And yeah, it's been great.
Yes, in connection to education in children, I've been aware of some, basically on Facebook, I get all the feeds. So I've been hearing about this WOW project. WOW project. WOW project was like, what is the WOW project?
Yeah, well, I've been part of 3PGC community of education, and in January there was 10 of us that came to the table, and they said, what are we going to do this year? And we decided to do this a global project, because the field of mental health is really looking at what's not working. And so there's a lot of days like anti-bullying days, and the issue around anxiety in our schools and the stress that kids are experiencing these days. And we know that once kids see these principles, they're going to experience their resilience. There won't be bullying happening anymore, or less of it. And so we want to showcase that. We want to showcase young people who hear the principles and share what they've learned about thought, mind, and consciousness with the world. And so the WOW Project is about people who are working with young people, or if you're a parent and you have a child at home that you've raised in a way that they understand these principles well, and you videotape it, or they write a poem or are creative around it. We want to hear from them, and we want to upload it. So we want to see it from all over the world, all these different kids that are seeing the gift of these three principles in their lives.
I love that. And something that occurred to me just like last year, I had one of my guests, Wendy Sajisi, and she brought her son along to the show. I, if I remember correctly, his name is Thomas Sajisi.
Hmm.
So she brought along her son to the show, and he was sharing with him how he had a terrible experience at school, but because he had the inside out understanding, how that helped him out to move on swiftly and with ease, because he could really recognize and realize where his experience was coming from. So something that potentially could be very traumatic if he didn't know any better, but because he had this understanding, it really helped him out. So yeah, I I, I love children. So they are so close to the truth,
To
to
the
the way
wisdom.
things work. Yes.
Yes, my daughter, when she was in grade 2, we watched a movie about bullying. So there's a American Girl is a organization in the US that have these gorgeous dolls, but they also have a lot of videos about empowering girls. And so one of their videos uh, was about bullying. And so this girl came to a new school and she was bullied, um, and how she came through it. It was lovely to watch. But my daughter was in grade 2, so she was 7 years old. And she got really reflective after that movie. And I was very conscious of that, because I'm always hesitant to show them movies about bullying, and because it can be mean. And she goes, Mom, I want to start a girls club. I went, okay. All the girls in my class, all the girls in grade 2, all the girls in the school. And I was like, okay. So, well, we'll talk to your teacher. And we were so lucky, because the teacher that she had that year saw all her students as little leaders. So regardless of their behavior, she saw them as a leader. So I thought, okay, this is a perfect opportunity to really see where this could go. So the next morning, come downstairs, and she's already at the kitchen table writing out what they're going to do in this girls' club. And the first two things on her list was the sun and the clouds. And those are the metaphors I use to teach the principles to young people, like from K to 3, K to 4
Mhm.
age group. And so I thought, okay, this is good. It's not just about arts and crafts. And so we went and talked to her teacher, and she loved the idea. And at that time, I was talking to the parent group because there were some issues in grade 1. And so Morgan became my co-facilitator. And so she came into the grade 1 classes. So we went in for 20, 30-minute class. And then we also went into her classroom as well. And it was so fun to have her part of that and for her to see that already. And that's like, wow, these kids need to know this. Like that started actually in kindergarten because parents went in and did a 5-minute presentation of their work. And she goes, Mom, you have to talk about the sun and the clouds. I went, okay. And I only had time to talk about the sun because to me that's the most important. And then when we left that day, Mom, you didn't talk about the clouds. Why didn't you talk about the clouds? So I just thought, wow, what they can see already. It
And
was,
Quinn, can I just ask a quick question? So for parents that might be watching this show right now and they are
of
wondering what does the sun and the clouds represent? Would you mind explaining a little bit?
course, yeah. Well, nature is our best teacher when it comes to these principles in my mind because they operate already beautifully in the system, in the universal system. It's not questioned, it's just there. And it's no big whoop. If there's we have a lot of forest fires this last couple of years, so forests are just devastated. But there's regrowth, it's just there's a natural rhythm to life. And so helping our kids just see the natural rhythm of their mental life is such a gift if you could do that at a younger age so that they don't have to go through so many bumps later on. So the sun is really about mind. It's about being aware, consciousness of mind. And the sun is such a beautiful metaphor because it's warm. Um, it feels good when you're in the sun. I feel relaxed. My spirit feels great. So when we're in our sun, it's a good feeling. And yeah, clouds come in, and sometimes we have different shapes of clouds. And I remember my daughter when she was about 6 or 7, she asked me one morning, Mom, so, rain clouds is when I'm sad, and, dark clouds is when, I'm angry, and, you know, what about windy clouds or stormy clouds? What's that about? So she was already trying to figure out, wow, we've got all these different clouds inside of us. and and I was on a call with a group of facilitators one time, and we don't want to talk about clouds. It's like, well, we also have these gorgeous pink clouds, at sunset time where the sun is reflecting through those beautiful clouds. So clouds are thoughts, and they come in all shapes and sizes. So if you lay on the grass with your daughter or your child, and you look at the clouds in all these different shapes, and that's what thought is about. It's all these different shapes, and they come in different sizes and different colors. And but we always know behind every cloud is the sun. It will always come back up, and that is the best gift you can give your child, is to know that they will always come back to this beautiful place inside of them that's warm and resilient and loving and patient and kind.
Mm, mm. I love that for so many reasons, and I'm looking back into my childhood, but I was well, I had both my parents, and they are very different, as understandably. And one of the many things I loved about my dad, well, was the first man I ever loved in my life. So yeah, I love my dad. You don't have explanation for that, but one of the things I loved about my dad was how he asked me questions. And he asked me deep questions and allow me the space to answer the questions
Mm.
and allow me to come to my own conclusions. And then he would ask me, oh, why is that? So in essence, without me realizing, is that he was teaching me how to think and how to trust my own wisdom. And I remember very clearly when I was a teenager. Once I asked him to go in a school trip, and I asked my mom first because I would be away from home for 5 days, and my mom said, "Oh, go and ask your dad." So I went there and asked my dad, and he said, "Of course you can. You are a good kid, and you know what you're doing." And I remember I was 16, but my dad words, it just resonated with that part of me that knew that to be true, that I was a good kid and I could take care of myself. And that is just a tiny, tiny example, but that was like, okay, I'm not gonna give away how old I am, but it was many, many years ago, and it still warms me up because it is that knowing, and it is not empowerment from the outside in. Is recognizing that I do have the wisdom, and I do have the capacity for insight, and I do have the free will, and I can make the right choices. So yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how we as adults that surround children are always teaching about being in our son and being in that place and sharing our wisdom. And if it's through those wonderful questions that your dad shared with you, and just like for that to carry you through life, what a gift he gave you in that one little moment in time. And if our educators could see that, and we as parents can see that, that we're giving them a little gift by really seeing them, even in their upset. That's the hardest, but that is the best gift I think we could ever give our children, is not to get bothered by their upset and help them come back home to who they really are. And we've all had teachers like that. Both my daughters have this most incredible drama teacher. And I mean, I want to take his class because he just knows how to draw out that gorgeous human being that's inside of you and allow you to express it through drama. Like, oh my goodness, like he operates, and he gets grumpy. Like, that's the thing that my daughter says. He doesn't give compliments very much.
Mm.
And he gets grumpy, but he owns it. He doesn't make it about the kids. He owns it. So he's role modeling that he's human, and he has this, and he also sees their potential, and I'm here to draw that out of you. Like that, he comes to the classroom with that mindset. And what a gift.
Quinn, you said something right there, and all of it was valuable. But just one thing about the teacher, where I said he gets grumpy and he owns it, and he knows he's not about the kids. So I'm wondering how many parents out there are experiencing their thinking, because as you know, our
Yeah.
moods fluctuate, and they think that the kids are making them feel in a certain way only because it's a misunderstanding. Would you mind speaking about that? Because I feel that would help out a lot of parents out there.
Yeah, I do it all the time. And it's funny because when my kids were younger, we had the sun and the clouds to really talk about things. And so we don't get hung up with, well, those are big emotions or all of that. We just kind of loop it into one big soup. And and when we're grumpy, it's like, yeah, I'm in my clouds right now. And it's like, they get it. It's not about them. I'm in my cloud and I can't see straight right now. And for an example, my daughter, when she was, I think 5 or 6, I had just come home. It was Friday night. I was exhausted. It was a big week at work. And she was really grumpy when I got home. And of course, we have all these skills. It's like, okay, 1, 2, 3, and time for a timeout. And she didn't want to leave the room. She wanted to stay with me. And it's like, my thinking was like spiraling down and I wasn't going anywhere. But it was like I caught myself that I was in my cloud when I was engaging with her. So I thought, I'm going to go make a cup of tea. And so wisdom told me to make a cup of tea. So I made a cup of tea, and it was like I could breathe again. You know, it's breathing into that space inside of me that knows better and knows how beautiful my child is, even in this very moment. And going back to her, I had different eyes. I had loving eyes. I had eyes that saw her, not the behavior. And when you are present to that with your child, even in their upset, they hear it too. It may not come down fast, but you've just created the space for them to come back to their well-being. And there's no technique, there's no skill to that. It's just the feeling inside of me changed. And we had a lovely night. She was 5, she is now 17. That moment is still with me. It's like the one with your dad. You know, those moments when we stay completely present, there's a feeling that comes with that stays with you. And it's so lovely. And it's a teaching moment. It's a learning moment for me. It's like that to me it was a gift that when I came home, she was in that space.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I feel that is a wonderful place to pause for today. So, Quinn, how can people reach out to you?
I've got a few things going on. I revived Girl Spirit about a year ago, and I've just been playing with it. So I'm on Instagram, Girl Spirit Beauty. So I post there some little gems, tips, beauty tips. And I really look at beauty from the idea that within the word beauty, it's be you. And so really playing with that word of beauty, because it is about being ourselves again. So, and then girlspirit.ca is a place where I'm just sharing, where I want to really share life skills with moms, because when I've reached out to moms, a lot of them are struggling with, you know, how do I raise vibrant girls? How do I call them my vibe girls? Because when a girl is, you know, really understanding womanhood, coming into womanhood, she's vibrant, she's insightful, she's brave, and she's empowered. And so as moms, if we can really understand how we can truly support them in raising those daughters so that, you know, when they go out into the world, they're creating change in such a beautiful way. And we have an opportunity to do that as moms.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Quinn. And for me, if you would like to reach out, you can find me on Facebook. So that would be at www.facebook.com/Clésia.Mendes. Or you can find me on my website. So that would be www.clesiamendes.com. And I'll spell out that for you. It is www.ClesiaMendes.com. And one of my favorite parts in the show, Quinn, what would be your parting thoughts for our audience today?
My parting thought is to live your life beautifully.
I love that. Thank you very much. And to our audience, thank you very much for being with us today. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of Womanhood from the Inside Out.